In this next segment, let's explore the question of how do you get participation. So if you've got hands going up all around the room, participation is really easy. If you don't have hands going up all around the room, then you have a bigger problem, and you have to figure out how can I balance participation so that everybody gets a chance not only to speak, but to share their experience, background, perspective with the rest of the class so that they can learn and benefit from that sharing. Clearly, setting matters. If you're in a room that's flat and you can't see the people in the back or can't see their name tags, that's not good. If you don't grade participation, that's going to have an impact. If people know that whether they speak or not is going to have no effect on the other end. Now, I'll admit that grading participation, which we do anywhere from 30 to 50% of a person's final grade, depends on what they've said in class. Okay? There is a little bit of a level 1 threat there that if you don't speak, it'll affect your grade. Students are sensitive to that. So in our school, sometimes people will talk about their classmates making chip shots just so they can get in a little of airtime, and it's not very well thought out. Well, that's a judgment that each person makes. In my experience as an instructor, people who are willing to make a bunt single actually move the game along a little bit. If they hit a single using a baseball analogy, or a double, or in cricket hit it out of the park, that's going to move it much faster. And there are value, though, to the little incremental improvements, the moderate improvements, and the home run improvements. All are valuable in class. So I wouldn't be too concerned if people are making small comments, if they're not repeating what's already been said, and if they're moving us forward rather than backward. So obviously the easiest way to get participation is to call on volunteers. But if you only call on volunteers, you're only going to have maybe half to 2/3 of the class participating. And pretty soon it will be only 25% of the class participating, because you and I both know introversion, extroversion is arranged on a distribution, so that if you only call in volunteers, it'll only be a small subset of the students who get to speak. And the rest of the class will be annoyed, angered, and upset by that. So how do you balance participation is a big issue. How do you get the people who are quieter to participate? Well, there are a number of ways you can do that. We use cold calls. And by cold calls, I mean we call on somebody without them volunteering. There are a number of ways you can do that. You could use a random number generator. Sometimes the seats are numbered in the room, or you can number them yourselves. Pick a number out of a box, and number 27 is up today. Who is ever sitting in seat number 27, would you please begin? I sometimes will ask one student to pick a number between 1 and however many students there are in the room. If it's 25, pick a number between 1 and 25. They pick one, and then I say front, back, left, or right. And then I count from the front, from the back, from the left, or the right, however many they said, and then that person begins. It's a little bit of a humorous opportunity. Bob, you can thank Mary for this opportunity for speaking. And it adds a little randomness to the process so that they don't think you're picking on them. Some people feel intimidated by cold calls. It's a question of, am I prepared? Did I prepare well enough? Am I going to embarrass myself in front of my classmates? And some people find it intimidating and a fearful thing, whereas in my experience, most people find it an opportunity. It can actually be a happy, joyful experience where people get to practice. They get to show their stuff. They get to demonstrate how well they've prepared and analyze the case. Of course, you never know which one you're going to get called on, so if you haven't prepared every case, this can be a problem. So this also encourages students to prepare in advance. So that's a little bit of, if you compare carrot and stick, that's a little bit of a stick to get people to prepare. And then if they're prepared, they're more likely to be participative. I've already talked about the random number generator, or how student could pick a number and you could get people to participate that way. One of the issues that arises is what do you do about students who come from cultures where deference to seniority and to your elders is a cultural way of life? So frequently this is the case in Confucian Asia. It could be the case in Latin. It could be in a number of places. The issue of, well, it's my job to listen to the professor and not to question or comment on, or they view it as disrespectful. I've spent a semester overseas teaching in Japan. I've lived in Japan for 4 years. I've lived in Hong Kong. I've taught in China, Thailand, Japan, and China. And my experience is, once you explain what we're doing and why we're doing it in case method, to call on the benefit of everybody in the room, the knowledge of everyone in the room, and that you have two responsibilities, not only what you can learn, but also what you can contribute to the learning of others, it goes quite smoothly. Students understand that. Maybe they give a little slack because I'm an American, and I've seen Japanese and Chinese instructors use this effectively as well. So while some people would say case method is culturally bound, that has not been my experience. In fact, I would argue it's based in human nature, that people want to participate in discussion, they want to share their ideas, they want to see how that compares with the ideas of other people in the room, and they want to be found acceptable, to be found as a contributor. So for example, President Kennedy once said, "Ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country." The implication is that each person has value. And that's the assumption in a case method classroom. Every participant has something to offer, and my role as an instructor is, how do I make sure that I bring that out in a balanced way? Now, when people are constantly volunteering, people who want to dominate a class, this is a delicate thing to handle. You might say something like, "Thank you, Steve. You're always ready, and I really appreciate that. Let me see what somebody over here has to think." Or you could just not call on the person. I've done that on occasion, and that offended the person who had his hand up and wasn't called on. So that person's assumption was, every time I have my hand up, you should call on me. I want them to consider and accept another assumption, and that is that our goal here is to hear from everybody in the room, and your job, along with mine, is not to demonstrate how much you think you know, but rather to demonstrate and help us figure out what we collectively know, given our diverse backgrounds. So managing that participation is easier if you have that philosophical verb in mind, and your goal is to hear from everyone and not just from those few who are willing to jump in every time you open your mouth. I've mentioned